Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we cut through the chaos and go straight to the knowledge. Today, we are opening a document that's, well, it's less a memoir and maybe more like a tactical field guide to spiritual warfare. It really sits at this thrilling, almost terrifying intersection of classical Western occultism and modern psychological inquiry.
That document is William Bloom's extraordinary The Sacred Magician, a ceremonial diary. And like you said, this isn't just theory or looking back at history. This is raw. It's a primary source. Bloom's personal day-by-day account of undertaking what is, you could argue, the most demanding and psychologically taxing Western magical ritual out there.
Yeah, the 6-month ceremony known as the sacred magic of Abramelin the Mage.
Exactly. And the context here is pretty crucial. It's the autumn of 1972. Bloom is a successful London publisher. He's a novelist, only 26 years old.
Young.
Very young. And he decides to just abandon that path, travels to this remote lodge, like 6,000 feet up in the high Atlas Mountains of Morocco. Yeah, and his singular mission there was to put himself through half a year of intense, really grueling discipline and ritual purity.
So the stakes, according to these ancient texts he was following, they're absolute.
Yeah, completely. The Abramelin Operation is kind of divided into two distinct parts, and they have to be done consecutively. No breaks.
Okay.
The first part is this 6-month preparation. It culminates in achieving what the text calls full communication with your holy guardian angel, or the HGA.
EHGA, that's the big goal.
That's the primary goal of the first phase.
Yeah.
But then immediately following that, that potentially ecstatic, unifying conversation comes this mandatory second act. Mandatory. The systematic summoning, controlling, and commanding of the world's demonic entities.
Right. So not optional. You achieve communion, then you have to face the darkness, essentially.
That's the structure. Angel first, then demons.
Our mission, then, in this deep dive, is really to shortcut your understanding of this profound undertaking. We want to know what exactly happens when this incredibly rigorous, uncompromising 15th century ritual hits a modern, educated, Western mind Bloom's mind.
Yeah, we're looking beyond just the jargon, the esoteric terms.
Right. We want to explore the really stringent physical requirements, the environmental demands, the crushing psychological costs. He calls it the battle over and over again.
He does.
And maybe most importantly, the profound and clearly quite painful integration that was needed in the years that followed. It wasn't just over after 6 months.
Not at all. And what's really fascinating about Bloom's approach right from the start is this sophisticated dual lens he used.
Right.
He wasn't just a naive believer jumping in.
How so?
Well, on one side, he fully embraced the modern psychological interpretation. He was thinking, okay, the HGA could be like a Jungian archetype, a pure representation of my own soul, my true will,
Okay, so the inner self, the higher self.
Exactly. And in that framework, the demons he was supposed to summon, they represent the collective shadow aspects of his own psyche. The ritual then becomes this kind of psychological technology to encounter them, integrate them, command them internally.
Makes sense from a modern perspective.
But, and this is key, he didn't just stop there. He simultaneously went into it with the full commitment of a devoted mystic. He was completely prepared to explore a second possibility, a literal landscape.
You mean real angels, real demons?
Real angels, real demons, invisible worlds of energies, vibrations, things that exist outside the self. He noted that, all deep esoteric literature, whether it's Taoism or Sufism, they talk explicitly about this objective spiritual reality.
So he held both possibilities open, the internal metaphorical journey and the external spiritual reality?
Precisely.
Yeah.
He treated the ritual as a genuine bridge between the two. And that duality, that's really the framework for our whole discussion today.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning, the genesis of this whole thing. Why would a young guy, mid-20s, successful novelist, publisher in London, it sounds like he had it made, right? Why choose this path? Extreme isolation, psychological danger? It seems counterintuitive.
It really does on the surface. But he describes this profound, almost overwhelming sense of meaninglessness that just wouldn't go away, despite all the career success. He put it as an unbearable tension.
Tension between what?
Between two conflicting forces really pulling him apart. On one side, you had his education, rigid, intellectual, humanist, the standard British private school thing that really prizes rationalism.
Or it's the logical brain.
And on the other side, this powerful mystical instinct he felt he'd had since childhood, but had been forced to suppress.
That internal split. That sounds familiar. A lot of people feel that today, I think you achieve the goals society sets, but then there's this emptiness, or burnout.
Exactly that. Bloom saw himself as a compulsive personality, grappling with unresolved aggression, conflicting idealism. It led to severe confusion, feeling alienated, a total identity crisis, really.
So a superficial change wasn't going to cut it.
No way. He knew he needed something radical, something transformative at the core, and he saw the Abramelin Operation as basically the only mechanism intense enough, rigorous enough, to force the issue, to address that fundamental split in his being.
And it wasn't about power, you're saying, not about like learning spells or something.
Critically, no. He stated very clearly he wasn't interested in acquiring magical powers or phenomena in the flashy sense. He wanted the structural overhaul, the ritual promise to force upon his personality. The transformation itself was the goal.
But before he could just pack his bags and go, he felt he needed validation. You mentioned that.
Yes, that was crucial for him. He saw this whole thing as a necessary rite of passage, almost like a vision quest. And he credits two really extraordinary encounters with older, wiser men as giving him the spiritual authority he felt he needed. He called it their blessing and their power for the journey.
Why was that so important?
Well, Bloom pointed out, quite insightfully I think, that modern Western culture often fails to provide that deep, true attention and validation from an older, wiser person to guide the young. We lack those kinds of elders in many ways.
Okay, so who are these figures?
The first was the monumental American writer James Baldwin.
James Baldwin, wow.
Yeah. Baldwin had read Bloom's second novel, requested a meeting, and they had this immediate, deep personal connection.
So what did Baldwin provide?
Baldwin's support was like this emotional foundation, a really deep affirmation. Bloom talks about spending a weekend with him where Baldwin gave him, and this is a quote, total adoring attention.
Total adoring attention. That's powerful.
Incredibly. Baldwin apparently whispered his love, called him one of the great souls, and told him, "You are not alone. There were men who could understand my soul and that I was all right."
That kind of profound recognition, especially from someone like Baldwin, that must have been huge.
It was a massive emotional rite of passage. It kind of touched his whole being, gave him the inner confidence he needed to pursue a path that, let's face it, most people in his circle would probably dismiss as completely crazy. It anchored him.
Okay, so that's the emotional validation. Who was the second figure?
The second encounter gave him the intellectual and, crucially, the psychological green light. This was with Edward Glover.
Glover. Wasn't he one of the founders of the British psychoanalytic school, like close associate of Freud?
The very same. Glover was 81 when they met. Bloom sought analysis because he was genuinely worried. He thought his growing interest in occultism, in mysticism, would just be dismissed in that classic Freudian way, you know.
As neurosis, escapism.
Exactly. Simple psychic compensation, a young man avoiding reality. He needed to know if there was more to it.
And what did Glover say?
Well, their analysis, which lasted about 18 months, apparently broke all the classical psychoanalysis rules. Glover, while rigorous, was also described as wry and gentle. He gave Bloom that essential intellectual trust.
He didn't dismiss it.
Quite the opposite. He confirmed that Bloom's mystical instinct and his pursuit of this path had a sensible basis, that it wasn't just pathology. Glover eventually told him something quite remarkable. "Ah, William, you and I are probably the last two analysts alive that I would trust."
Wow, that's some endorsement.
It was the intellectual firewall Bloom needed. It basically gave him permission to move forward with this incredibly profound work without constantly second-guessing himself, without the ghost of his academic training or societal judgment weighing him down.
It freed his intuition, in a way.
Absolutely. And poignantly, they ended their therapy relationship just 3 weeks before Bloom left for Morocco. Glover died only a week after that.
So it was like a clear line drawn. The preparation, the validation phase was over.
Exactly. The training wheels were off. The operation had truly begun.
Okay, so he's got the emotional backing from Baldwin, the intellectual nod from Glover. He heads to the High Atlas Mountains in Morocco. What about the actual requirements of the Abramelin ritual itself? You said it was stringent.
Incredibly so. It's based on this 15th century manuscript, and the physical requirements are detailed and non-negotiable. He found this place, an old French colonial boar hunting lodge, way up at 6,000 feet near Mount Toubkal, deliberately isolated, miles from any modern road, any mundane influence.
And he had to build things.
Oh, yeah. These weren't just symbolic gestures. This was physical labor. He had to construct a specific, undisturbed location. He built an oratory, basically a small chapel on an isolated sun terrace.
Complete with?
An altar, a continuously burning oil lamp, a charcoal incense burner for specific perfumes, and very specifically, a corner of the floor had to be covered with clean river sand.
River sand? Why river sand? That seems oddly
Well,
specific.
it does. But it's vital in esoteric tradition, often overlooked. Sand, especially river sand, represents the earth element. It acts as a medium of reception, a grounding point. It's where spiritual energies, both the angelic and later the demonic, are supposed to be able to materialize or at least leave a trace.
So it wasn't just for show, it was functional within the ritual's logic.
Absolutely. The sand was required for the final constraints of the spirits. Its presence confirms that the operation intends to make the spiritual work manifest in some physical way.
And besides the space itself,
He also had to manufacture the tools and investments himself. This wasn't something you could just buy. It demanded time, focus, dedication.
like what?
Sewing his own special robes. Compounding the holy oil. Abramelin oil is a very specific recipe. Myrrh, fine cinnamon, galangal, and olive oil. And cutting an almond shoot, a young branch, to serve as his wand.
So the preparation itself is part of the discipline.
It absolutely is. It focuses the mind, commits the energy, and then on the day of the spring equinox in 1973, having set all this up perfectly, the operation proper began.
What did the daily routine look like during those first couple of months? The first 2 moons, as the text calls them.
Unforgiving is probably the best word. It started with prayer, precisely a quarter hour before sunrise, then again, exactly at sunset.
Precise timing.
Very precise.
Yeah.
And both times required a full ceremonial washing beforehand, then donning clean, fresh clothing before even entering the oratory. This ritual purity, twice a day, every day, establishes this unbreakable rhythm. It separates the sacred work from, just ordinary life.
And the prayers themselves, what was the focus?
Entirely on supplication and preparation. Invoking God, thanking Him for any past graces, making a full confession of all past sins, really digging deep there, and then supplicating Him to send the holy angel to be a constant guide, teacher, protector through the process.
What about lifestyle restrictions?
Just as demanding. He had to flee, and the text uses that word, flee all mundane and vain company and conversation.
Total isolation, basically.
Pretty much. Leading a tranquil, solitary life. Observing absolute moderation in everything, eating, drinking, sleeping, nothing to excess.
And sex.
Strictly forbidden for the first 4 months. The text says to flee it as you would the plague.
Wow. Okay.
And the core philosophy behind all this, which Abramelin stresses, is profoundly practical. This isn't just about ticking boxes on a checklist. The prayer has to come from a true heart, absolute sincerity, rote reading, empty recitation that's useless. The work demands emotional and spiritual authenticity above everything else.
So March 1973, Bloom starts the ritual proper. And you said the psychological storm hits immediately. It wasn't a gradual buildup.
No, instantaneous. He writes in his diary right away, "Every night, though, since I started, my head spins and rushes, elated then deflated, energy rushing through me."
Like being plugged into a socket.
Something like that. He felt this overwhelming, almost terrifying sense of something infinitely powerful and good interacting with him. And the result was being in what he called a peculiarly stressed condition. Right from day one, this intense inner duality started that would define the whole experience.
He was basically plunged straight into a psychological crucible. Was he prepared for that level of intensity?
Intellectually, yes. He'd studied esoteric concepts, including the dark night of the soul, which he'd read about in texts like Israel Regardie's The Tree of Life.
Can you remind us what that is, the dark night?
It's described as this horrid state where all the soul's powers seem dead. The person feels abandoned, marked by deep temptations, doubts, irrational fears. It's a classic stage in mystical paths, but terrifying to go through.
So he knew it might be coming. How did he approach that?
His reaction was really key to his ability to endure it, I think. He internalized the motto, "Forewarned is forearmed." He didn't see the intense discipline as just punishment or self-denial.
How did he see it?
He saw it as the cogs to start the motor of transformation. He understood that the outer rigor, the strict rules, were necessary to drive the inner change, to churn things up.
But this inner fight, it didn't stay inner for long, did it? You mentioned psychic battles.
Right. It quickly seemed to externalize, manifesting as these terrifying, quite literal psychic battles.
Yeah.
And this is where Bloom really had to confront that potential objective reality of the spiritual landscape he'd kept open as a possibility.
He documented specific encounters.
He did. Several really high-stakes encounters that are, they're hard to explain away simply as psychology.
Give us an example. What kind of threats are we talking about?
Okay, one was a physicalized astral entity, something non-physical trying to affect him physically. It attempted to enter his body, he said, causing a sensation of suffocation and smothering.
Frightening.
Definitely. But even more dramatic, and frankly chilling, was a malevolent visitation he experienced. It was in a dreamlike state, but felt utterly real. He was led into a room, greeted by two men. One of them, he said, was Adolf Hitler.
Hitler.
That's what he recorded. And the encounter turned terrifying almost instantly. Their tones switched, became totally malevolent and evil.
And it became physical.
Yes. The intensity manifested physically. Bloom felt his body was picked up, maneuvered like a paper doll, his words by some kind of negative electric charge. It left him physically pained and feeling completely powerless. He felt the physical effects, the trauma when he woke up. It wasn't just a bad dream fading away.
Okay, faced with stuff like that, what did he do? Did he try to defend himself?
He did. He tried the traditional defenses used in high magic, things like drawing pentagrams in the air or trying to erect what he called odic barriers.
Wait, odic barriers? What's that?
Good question. Odic force is an older esoteric term popular in the 19th century. It refers to a kind of vital life energy, or maybe magnetism, sometimes compared to chi or prana. An odic barrier is basically a psychic shield, a force field you build with focused visualization and willpower, meant to repel negative energies.
So standard magical self-defense techniques.
Exactly. And the really shocking thing for Bloom was finding they were utterly useless against whatever this was.
They didn't work.
Completely ineffective. The fact that the pentagrams, his own psychic defenses, failed. It demonstrated to him that he was dealing with forces far superior to his conscious will or any techniques he'd learned.
So what did work? What was his defense?
His only effective defense became absolute, almost aggressive faith, refusing to be frightened, refusing to be passive, instead launching an immediate counterattack of spiritual affirmation, like invoking divine names or authority. Active resistance through faith.
It sounds like a moment of maximum temptation, too. Didn't he mention being offered something?
Yes, a classic Faustian bargain scenario. He wrote that the entity told him, "You may have all power on earth and never be frightened and so hurt again." The ultimate lure, right? Power in exchange for ending fear and pain.
A core spiritual seduction. He obviously refused.
He did. Then, as he moved into the middle two moons months 3 and 4, the practices intensified again. More prayer, more spiritual cleansing, more fasting. And his body started to reflect the spiritual shifts.
How so? Physically?
He started experiencing things like head popping, that's his term, and a distinct burning sensation in his skull.
Sounds alarming.
It could be. But again, this brings us back to his need for specialized interpretation. He didn't just write it off as a stress headache.
He connected it to his esoteric studies.
Right. He actively interpreted these physical sensations through the lens of texts he was studying, specifically works by Alice Bailey and the Tibetan master Jejwal Kul she channeled.
And what was their interpretation?
In that particular system, these sensations, especially the burning at the crown, were seen as signs of the activation of the Sahasrara chakra, the thousand-petaled lotus, the crown chakra in yoga. In the Bailey Tibetan framework, activating this center indicates the potential for what they call the third initiation. This is considered a major phase shift in spiritual evolution, where the personality becomes consciously and, importantly, permanently linked to the higher soul or causal body.
So for Bloom, this physical symptom wasn't just random, it was objective proof in his framework that the ritual was actually working, transforming his energy body.
Exactly. It validated the process for him, even though it was physically strange or uncomfortable.
But the psychological strain didn't let up, even with these signs of progress.
Not at all. It was continuous. Even as he felt spiritual progress, the internal struggle still felt like being on a battlefield. He wrote about grappling with the horror of the duality within himself.
And this had real-world consequences, particularly for his relationship.
Yes, a devastating impact on his relationship with his partner Frances, who was there with him. He admitted quite openly in the diary that during this phase, he felt incapable of proper love or affection for her. His intense inner focus, his battle with his own shadow aspects, meant he could often only perceive her through the shadow aspects of her personality, seeing reflected the very parts he was fighting in himself.
That's harsh.
It provides a really harrowing insight, doesn't it? Radical self-transformation undertaken with this level of intensity can temporarily, or sometimes permanently, override the capacity for healthy, grounded human connection. His inner world just became all-consuming. The outer world, including the people he loved most, inevitably suffered.
It's just striking, the sheer range of states he seemed to navigate. You mentioned the battles, the duality, but were there moments of peace?
Oh, yes. He moved between moments he identified as samadhi, that blissful, concentrated state of meditative absorption where he felt the potential rule of his oversoul or HGA, and then crashing down into total spiritual defeat.
What did defeat feel like?
He described being totally physically wiped out, experiencing deep despair, a kind of dried-out emptiness. It wasn't a smooth, linear progression at all, more like wild oscillations.
How did he cope with those crashes?
He relied heavily on external tools for orientation, things like the I Ching, the Chinese oracle, and the Zohar, the core text of Kabbalah, to try and understand where he was and regain his footing.
It sounds incredibly demanding, the self-inflicted pressure alone.
Immense. He writes about the battle to be worthy to do. His work, to merely have the right to truly love him, continues infinitely with pain, which we deserve. There's a real sense of intense striving and self-judgment.
Did he ever feel like he was interacting directly with those negative forces in the oratory itself?
Yes, he even mentions actively bargaining with malevolent energies that sometimes seem to appear there, his tactic, forcing them to sing psalms with him until they dissipated.
Forcing demons to sing psalms.
An extraordinary exercise in spiritual dominance, right? Not just repelling them, but compelling them into sacred acts against their nature. It shows the level of will he was cultivating.
Okay, so we're moving into the final phase, the last 2 moons, months 5 and 6. This is the final sprint towards the climax. Does the discipline ramp up even more?
It does. Once more, it becomes almost unbearable by ordinary standards. Bloom is now praying 3 times a day, dawn, noon, and sunset.
Instead of just 2.
Right. And he has to wear his white linen vestments constantly now, not just during prayer.
Living in ritual garb.
Pretty much. And the oratory environment has to be perfectly maintained. The lamp must be continuously lit day and night. Perfume, specific incense must be burned constantly.
And contact with the outside world.
Almost entirely cut off. Society is shunned completely, except for Francis and the local servants who assisted them. His time, when not praying or maintaining this base, is dedicated solely to speaking of God's law and reading holy works. The goal is total spiritual absorption.
Is the focus of the prayer different in this final phase?
Yes, it becomes very explicit. The final prayers are a direct supplication, asking God to allow him to enjoy and be able to endure the presence and conversation of his holy angels.
Asking for the capacity to handle it.
Exactly. And also asking for the secret wisdom necessary to dominate the evil spirits in the next mandatory part of the operation. He's asking for both the communion and the power to handle the consequences.
So after 6 solid months of this hypervigilance, isolation, intense discipline, the moment of truth finally arrives. The 7 days of consecration, convocation, and conjuration.
That's the final sequence. And on the 3rd day of this week, that's when the holy guardian angel is formally supplicated to appear. This is the peak moment everything has been building towards.
And after all that perfect execution, all that intense expectation, what happened?
A terrifying, gut-wrenching anticlimax. Nothing.
Okay, after 6 months.
Absolute silence. He poured every ounce of his being into that invocation, emerged from that intense state. And there was just emptiness, a complete vacuum.
How did he react?
It was an absolute psychological collapse.
Wait.
He described being left entirely alone, seeing himself in the robes, with the oil, the altar, his bent body. All the props of a ritual that suddenly seemed utterly worthless, meaningless.
Like it was all for nothing.
Exactly. He turned ice cold in frigid self-consciousness, feeling like both the cynic and vanquished. In that moment, he genuinely believed the materialists were right, that he was lost in some pathetic fantasy. This sheer weight of the perceived failure, the wasted effort, just broke him.
What did he do?
He physically left the oratory, stumbled back to his room, collapsed in bed, just wishing desperately for unconsciousness, for it all to stop.
But that wasn't the end of the story.
No. The turning point came almost immediately after hitting rock bottom. Lying there, completely defeated, he heard a voice, a sweet and beautiful voice inside his head. Clear auditory communication, internal, telling him, come back into the oratory.
A voice? Whose voice?
He identified it as his teacher, implying the HGA or a guiding spiritual presence. It intervened right at the moment of his greatest despair.
So he went back.
He did. He returned to the oratory, and this time he achieved what the Abramelin text calls full conversation with his holy guardian angel.
He actually spoke with it. Or it spoke with him.
Both. A genuine dialogue. The angel confirmed the objective reality of the spiritual world, answering that core question he'd held.
Did the angel explain anything else?
Yes, significantly. It provided cosmological insight. It explained the concept of the rebellion of angels, which is central to the Abramelin tradition.
What's that about?
Essentially, it outlines that the demonic hierarchy he was about to confront were once high spiritual intelligences themselves, but they rebelled against the divine order. As a result, they are now condemned to servitude and must be compelled to work within the structure of God's law through the agency of a prepared magician rather than against it.
So it gave him context for the next step, the demon summoning.
Exactly. And it confirmed its own reality in a very unexpected, almost mundane physical way.
How?
Bloom noted, "He made me shuffle and be clumsy in his presence."
Clumsy. The angel made him clumsy.
Apparently so. This unexpected physical awkwardness, feeling physically displaced or uncoordinated in the angel's presence, served as this concrete, undeniable confirmation for Bloom. It wasn't just a thought or a feeling, it had a physical correlate. It convinced him he was in the presence of a real, objective, powerful spiritual being, not just imagining things. The spirit world was real because it literally made him trip over his own feet.
That's strangely validating in a way.
It's grounding, isn't it? Anchors the sublime in the physical.
So he's achieved communion. He's received guidance, authority from the angel. Now comes the dark half of the ritual.
The dark half. Constraining the demonic hierarchy. This process lasts for the next 3 days, and the protection of the HGA is absolutely non-negotiable here, because you're dealing with high-level negative intelligences according to the system.
Who exactly was he summoning?
The top of the hierarchy. The four superior princes, the text names them as Lucifer, Leviathan, Satan, and Belial. Then immediately after, the 8 sub-princes, which include some infamous names like Astaroth, Asmodeus, Magath, Beelzebub.
So the big names of demonology.
Pretty much the main players in the Western grimoire tradition.
And how did he do it? What was the method?
Now vested with the authority of God, explicitly protected by his angel, he used the consecrated almond wand. He stood on the terrace, likely near the sand patch, and propounded his demands for their servitude.
Propounded demands, not asking nicely.
Definitely not. This is commanding by divine right as established through the 6 months of purification and the HGA contact. The goal is to force them, compel them, into an oath of allegiance, to make them swear they will only act according to God's law or according to the magician's will when it aligns with that law.
That sounds incredibly dangerous. How did it go?
Astonishingly smoothly, according to his account. Bloom found that the spirits were constrained with most great and surprising ease.
Really? After all the build-up?
Yes. And his realization was that the 6 months of incredibly rigorous preparation hadn't just been about getting the angel's attention. It had also purified him to such an extent, made his psychological and spiritual attitude so almost impeccable, that it left the princes and sub-princes very little room to maneuver.
Meaning?
They had few psychological hooks. They couldn't easily chide him for hypocrisy, tempt him with obvious flaws, or ensnare him through ego or fear because the process had burned so much of that away.
Yeah.
His preparation was his protection.
And did he get proof? You mentioned the sand earlier.
Yes. Abraham the Jew, the purported author of the original text, insists that the magician must get tangible proof, must never take the spirit's compliance lightly or just assume it happened. So the spirits were required to swear their oaths of allegiance physically on the river sand covering part of the terrace.
And did they?
According to Bloom, yes. He notes, with this mix of surprise and almost dry humor, that they left clear marks on the sand.
Physical marks.
Physical marks. And for him, that was the final undeniable confirmation, bridging the metaphorical and the literal completely. As he put it, it is a real thing.
Ooh. Okay, so the ritual is complete. HGA conversation achieved. Demonic hierarchy constrained. Physical proof obtained. You'd expect, I don't know, ecstatic peace. Supreme power. Maybe the start of some powerful magical career.
That would be the logical assumption, perhaps the fantasy. But the reality, the immediate post-ceremony shock, was completely different. Bloom fell severely ill. Severely ill with hepatitis B. And this wasn't just a minor bout. It lasted almost 2 years. It left him, in his words, so weak that I was virtually unable to move.
2 years after going through all that. That seems incredibly cruel, almost like a punishment.
It might seem that way on the surface, but in his own analysis, looking back, he saw this physical collapse as an absolutely necessary spiritual intervention.
Necessary.
He referred to it as the only economic way, efficient way, his body and his whole energy system could possibly cope with the immense, incredibly volatile energies he had contacted and unleashed. He felt he had, in a sense, stormed heaven and achieved such a radical shift in consciousness so quickly.
That his physical body just couldn't handle it.
Exactly. His physical vehicle needed a complete, forced shutdown to even begin to integrate that vast energetic influx safely.
Yeah.
The illness was the integration process, forced upon him.
Did anything significant happen during the illness itself?
Yes. During the most critical points, when he was closest to death, he experienced classic, fully conscious near-death experiences. Found himself outside his body, aware, even part of a decision-making process, about whether he would return to life or not.
Was that frightening?
Surprisingly, no. He described those NDEs as extremely beautiful and deeply reassuring. They completely transformed his view of death. It went from being a terrifying unknown end to something like a trusted, knowable friend or transition.
So the illness, despite being debilitating, had this profound spiritual upside.
Absolutely. And the 2 years of enforced rest, where he said his brain was functioning at maybe 1/10 of its normal speed, served that integration purpose perfectly. Remember how he started? Defined by that unbearable tension, that compulsive personality.
Right, the driving force behind the whole quest.
The illness effectively cured that. The forced inactivity stopped the psychic explosion, as he called it. It taught him, forced him, to radically slow down his internal speed. And most fundamentally, it taught him how to simply be present.
How do you mean?
Present without needing action, without compulsive movement, without grasping thoughts, just being something his driven personality couldn't achieve before. The illness gifted him stillness.
But integrating fully took longer than just those 2 years.
Oh, much longer. This wasn't automatic. The long-term integration process required years of subsequent dedicated work.
What kind of work?
Continuous meditation practice. More intellectual rigor. He eventually went back and got a psychology PhD, integrating his experiences with academic understanding. And significantly, intensive service work with others, reflecting that duty aspect that the angel had emphasized.
Did the experience change his view of magic itself?
It clarified his path immensely. He used the experience to really emphasize his focus remained firmly on what he called the royal path of magic, or high magic.
Let's clarify that distinction again. High magic versus low magic.
Right. High magic for Bloom, and in this tradition, is concerned solely with the inner transformation of the personality. Alchemically speaking, burning away the dross, the ego, the lower self, into spirit gold. The aim is self-purification in order to better serve humanity or the divine will.
And low magic.
Low magic is concerned with acquiring phenomena, powers, effects in the world, material results, manipulating circumstances or people through spells or psychic influence.
And Bloom.
Bloom insists that after the illness, the phenomena, the lure of low magic, never tempted him again. He felt he understood the true, arduous purpose of the path was that difficult internal transformation, not the flashy external results. The illness burned away that temptation too.
Looking back on the whole 6-month ordeal, the 2-year recovery, what did he see as the single most valuable lesson?
The absolute necessity of self-discipline. That came through again and again. He learned that just having spiritual aspirations, wanting to be good or loving or transformed, is woefully insufficient.
Why?
Because love, compassion, transformation itself, these things actively require discipline to be practiced day in, day out. Without that underlying rigor, that structure of discipline, our aspirations are just doomed to fail when they hit the pressures of mundane life or our own inner shadow.
Discipline isn't the enemy of spirit, but its necessary vehicle.
Precisely.
Now, we have to touch on the human cost again. You mentioned the strain on his relationship with Francis during the ritual. What happened afterwards?
The extreme stress, and maybe more pointedly, the fundamental personality change the ritual and the subsequent integration produced ultimately destroyed the relationship.
It couldn't survive his transformation.
Apparently not. Bloom notes quite candidly in his writings that he was, quote, no longer the creature who had attracted and interested Francis. The person she had partnered with was gone. They separated in 1978, several years after his recovery was complete.
That's a profound cost.
It is. And it's a crucial, maybe sobering takeaway for anyone contemplating such a radical path. Successful spiritual transformation at this depth means the person you were is literally gone.
And relationships built on that old self might not fit the new one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
While Bloom expressed immense gratitude for Francis's support and courage during the intense ceremony itself, he acknowledged he couldn't have done it without her. The new, integrated William Bloom was fundamentally incompatible with the relationship built around the old, conflicted one. Achieving wholeness, for him, came at the price of that partnership.
So just to kind of recap the journey we've traced with William Bloom here, we started with this cynical, outwardly successful publisher but inwardly driven by a classic modern identity crisis, that unbearable tension.
Right.
He transforms into this incredibly disciplined spiritual warrior, isolated in the high Atlas Mountains. He goes through psychological collapse, achieves this profound communion with a supreme angelic consciousness, systematically constrains the demonic hierarchy,
It's a proof on the sand?
gets the proof on the sand, and then is immediately thrown into a 2-year debilitating illness, which, counterintuitively, ends up being the absolutely necessary integration period for his radically transformed consciousness. It's quite a trajectory. It really is. So what does this all mean for you, the listener, the learner? I think it's a really detailed illustration of the sheer, sometimes devastating labor involved in genuine spiritual awakening, at least via this kind of intensive path.
Absolutely. Bloom's diary drives home that transformation isn't just about reading books, gaining abstract knowledge, or even just having passive faith.
It requires more.
It requires extreme psychological endurance,
Physical rigor.
a willingness to confront terror, both inner and potentially outer, and, as we saw, a willingness to accept that the eventual price might be the complete restructuring of your external life, relationships included.
It's not a casual undertaking.
Not in the slightest.
No.
Bloom's ultimate paradox, I think, offers us a really powerful final thought for contemplation. It kind of transcends the specifics of magic and enters the realm of just practical conscious living.
What's the paradox?
He suggests the world holds us captive through constant stimulation, distractions, the demands of apparent necessity. And this captivity causes us deep internal pain when we try to disengage, when we try to align with a higher purpose or a deeper spiritual reality.
We feel the pull of the mundane fighting against the call of the spirit.
Exactly. But, he suggests, if we can balance our natural instinct for love and service with what he calls spiritual courage.
Spiritual courage?
Yeah, the discipline to actually transform ourselves, to stand firm against the pressures of our own ego and the constant pull of the mundane world. Then and only then can we truly move forward on our chosen path.
So the final question isn't just about Abramelin, it's broader.
It's for you, the aspirant, the listener. Are you willing to embrace the intense discipline and potentially pay the steep psychological price that might be needed for genuine, lasting transformation in your own life, whatever form that takes?
A compelling question indeed. Thank you for diving deep with us today on this extraordinary account.
A pleasure. Until next time.